Welcome back to Coffee and Cuts. I'm Jonathan Meek, and we're so excited that you joined us today. I'm here with Pastor Brett, and this week we want to spend some time recapping the Inconvenient Truth series. We just got done going through 9 weeks of the different Inconvenient Truths, and we ran the gamut on a little bit of everything. If I had to summarize it up, it would be get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
That's a good way to describe Inconvenient Truths. Yeah, I think it was a journey through discomfort. And that's what it was meant to be. This thing started as kind of a social media experiment. In fact, Coffee and Cuts. This is interesting. A lot of viewers probably don't realize this. Is that you're actually the person who dreamed up Coffee and Cuts, and you didn't even know that you were dreaming it up.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far.
Right? I had posted something funny about cutting my kid's hair. And
I'm a dangerous man with a clipper in my pocket.
Yeah, I was making Bruno jokes, and Jonathan got on the thread and said, "Hey, Coffee and Cuts with Pastor Brett, and this should be the name of your new podcast." Like it was like a smiley face, tongue in cheek, like totally a joke. And
Totally.
And I remember when I read that, I was like, "There's something to that name," and I started passing it around. I was like, "Hey, this is something we were thinking about doing. What do you think?" And people were like, "Oh, I love it. It's stick. I get it." And this whole idea of Inconvenient Truths really partnered with Coffee and Cuts in that way, in a really symbiotic way, because Inconvenient Truths started on social media too. It started with me essentially asking the internet, asking Facebook, "Hey, we want to do a new series that does pull us into some uncomfortable areas of the Bible. What are some of the things that Jesus specifically said in the New Testament?" Obviously, there's lots of uncomfortable things, inconvenient truths, way outside the Gospels. But we just said, hey, in the Gospels, what are some of the things that Jesus said, and what are they inconvenient? Why are they inconvenient to you? And man, we just got I forget how many responses. I mean, 60.
What's interesting about that is people, for whatever reason, if you ask someone to their face, you might get a mixed response. But something about putting it online and someone about being behind their keyboard or on their phone, they're just a little bit more vulnerable and willing to share what some of those things are, right?
Yeah, I think it gave them a space to be able to think about it and say, okay, this is an inconvenient truth to me, and here's why. And so, we got all these responses, and a lot of them were duplicates. You can imagine, forgiveness. That was a big one. Or unforgiveness, really, when someone wrongs you, to forgive them and to love them and to bless them. And that's a pretty inconvenient truth, and so a lot of people struggled with that. Worry. When we did that week on worry, a lot of people, had that inconvenient truth of Jesus saying, "Do not worry."
Yep.
And so, there were a lot of overlaps, and then we just tried to really boil down, pray over all the rest of them, and say, okay, Lord, we see these areas of concentration. We think these should be weeks because there were so many people who were concerned about them. And then some of the more isolated ones, like this one that we just did, which I think there was only one person who wrote this one in for the last Inconvenient Truths that we did with communion, and the source of true communion was the title of the message from John 6. But someone was like, hey, there's a communion coming up. Are you going to talk about when Jesus says, "Unless if you eat my flesh and drink my blood, there's no life in you"? And I was like, yeah, I think we probably should.
Yeah, I'll probably cover that one. So I'm curious, as the pastor, as someone who spends so much time, more than the average person probably, in the Word and preparing for these sermons, you gave all of them. What did God speak to you out of all of them? Which is the one that resonated to you or spoke to you most during this season of your life?
Yeah, I think the thing that Jesus shared with me through this time, Jonathan, is that I didn't say hard things just to be hard on you, And I think that's the deep truth is Jesus didn't just say these things to be hard. He said these things because they lead to life, and they are really hard. Forgiveness is hard. Not having anxiety and not worrying and giving up my necessity to control and manipulate situations so that I feel like I have some power over them, rather than giving it over to the Lord and trusting and abiding that He has a story for me, even if I can't see what it is in front of me. It's just, these are difficult things. And I don't know if there was one that just really stood out to me more than anything. I think it's just Jesus reminding me, saying, I didn't say these things just to make a name for myself. I said these things because I'm God, and I said these things because they bring life.
Yeah, no doubt. What I find interesting is that all of them, we've talked about this offline, is I don't know if there was anything, at least for me, that was new. I've been a Christian for most of my life, know a lot of these things, but it's just refocusing sort of through each of those lenses and getting regrounded, and again, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's like if you're truly following in the footsteps of Jesus, you're not going to the country club, you're going to the hospital, right? And there's such a big gap there in what people want to maybe think that church is like, sort of in America, with, overproductionized Sunday morning, and it's all about me, and I'm a consumer, and I'm going to show up 2.4 times a month, and I'm going to do what's convenient for me. And it's cliche with the title of it, with inconvenience, and it's like, man, it's so different with actually in the execution of this thing and walking the walk versus just talking the talk.
Yeah. I think that's the other end of it then too, is Jesus saying, I'm not just saying it to be hard, I'm saying it because it leads to life. And what you just said is there's an exciting life in actually following Jesus and the things that he said and did. And I think that's one thing that I just feel like so many people are missing. Like, I don't know about you. I know you travel a lot. You talk to a lot of people. Been a Christian a long time. I just don't always meet Christians. And I wish I could say this with like 100% of the time this happens. But I just don't always meet Christians who just are living that excited life. Yeah. They're not living this joy-filled, dangerous, exciting walk of leading people to Jesus and discipling those who love him and know him. And they're just plodding through, they're going along, they're going to church 2.4 times a month.
Rolling through the motions.
They're going through the motions, and they just, they're just not striking me as like, wow, I'm living this radically full life. And I may not have all the money, I may not have all the health, I may not have all the things that the world tells me I'm going to need to like be happy and whole. But I'm living this really full life because I'm following Jesus.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, what's the fruit, right? That's what we talked about a couple of weeks ago. I think the question becomes, if you push the mute button on your life and you looked over the past 7 days, what's the fruit or evidence that you would be a Christian? Or do you just look like any other normal good person? And then what's within your control is, if that mute button's still going for the next 7 days, you have the opportunity today to make a change. And it starts with taking a little step, like we talked about last week.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's something in this series that the Lord really wanted to come to birth at, certainly at Calvary, where we call home. And I realize there's people online who are watching who aren't a part of Calvary, but I think every church embodies this same ethos, especially in North America, that there's this sense of very comfortable, complacent, controlled Christianity. We have this box that we say, okay, this is what church looks like, and God fits in there, and it's whatever the culture is, whatever your church is, that's what fills that box. And then there's when we leave the building, when we go out, and now what, right? Who are we? Who do we become? And so many people just put a period right at the at the end of Sunday morning. They're like, oh, that was great. Church was awesome.
I'm fulfilled.
Like, I'm fulfilled. I'm good. I did my thing, and the period goes on when it's really supposed to be a semicolon. It's like it's the comma that there's more to come after it. There's more to that sentence than what was just said, and I think that's the thing that we're missing in our
you're
culture.
Spot on, and we talked about this last week. So so the question becomes, for those who are watching, over the last 7 days, did you do anything about it?
Yeah.
It's like all the answers to the test are out there. This is not a hard one to figure out.
Right.
But it comes down to myself as an individual, or yourself, or who's ever watching, for taking action, taking a step out. And I guarantee you, if you take a step, God's going to take a step and meet you right in the middle.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that's the question that every pastor, asks at the end of their message is, what are people going to do with this? What is the next step? And we try as hard as we can to be in the spirit and to lay out what we believe is the most Christ-honoring, edifying step that we can give. But at the end of the day, like you said, you're going to have to take that step. You're going to have to apply it. And not only are you going to have to apply it, you're actually going to have to care for the step of your brother and the step of your sister.
That's right.
It's not just, hey man, look, I do me, I walk my walk, and okay, I'm good. I don't care about you. That's not scriptural Christianity.
That's not the church.
No, and the Bible tells me to look after you, not just because I'm your pastor, because I'm your friend. And the vice versa for you, to be able to say, hey, Brett, man, how are you doing? How's life? What's going well? What's not going well? So, when we go to these inconvenient truths, we do need to go back to our brothers and sisters. Certainly start with ourselves, but then to be able to go out of ourselves and say, hey, man, tell me about, how you're doing, not being spiritually emaciated. Make sure you're getting the nutrition of a relationship with Jesus into your heart and soul. Where are you eating? What have you eaten since Sunday? And to ask your brother and let them tell you how their diet's been in Jesus.
Yeah, no doubt. And people just got to start getting okay with being vulnerable too. You know, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I remember there's this precedence in the church that everything's okay. I'm so buttoned up and my life's fine. And yeah, I know that there's people that are struggling with stuff, but not me, because heaven forbid that I have something that is challenging or a tough season that you're going through with life. But when you have that community via small groups or your brothers and sisters within your local church, there's so much more accountability, people to help you get through those times, so you're not just feeling like a person out there on your own.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think if I was to say, what two things were mission critical in this series, right? What two things really stood out to me as being just mission imperative? One would have been the week where we talked about, the road to life is narrow, and few will find it, and the road to destruction is wide, and many enter by it. There's this deep sense within me that we need to bring that message to the local church and say, hey, don't think you're saved because you went to church your whole life, or went to Christian school, or even had really good things around you to ultimately point you to Jesus, unless if you've eaten of the living bread that is Jesus Christ and you've entered into that relationship with Him personally, you are outside of that promise still. And so it doesn't matter, proximity doesn't make you righteous, right? So that call of bringing evangelism to the local church, I think is so critical, and making sure we're rightly reconciled with God for the right reasons.
Yeah, you bet.
Right? And then, so the second thing would be then the purpose of the church. So now that the church is the bride of Christ, one with Christ, reconciled to Christ, believing in Christ, now the church has to be a hospital, not a country club. Now we have to be an emergency room for the broken. We have to accept that we are broken, that Jesus Christ has healed us, that we've been redeemed with a purpose and by a power of mercy and love, and now we have to bring that same presence into our Sunday mornings, but also every other day between Sundays. Mm-hmm. And if there's anything that, I would say that I just felt like God lit a fire under my soul, but under the souls of a lot of people at our church, and I pray the churches that are out there watching this too, are those two simple things. Make sure that, the folks who say they're Christians are walking with Christ and there's fruit of that, and that they are on the narrow road, because the narrow road brings onto a narrow life that is full of joy, but also that the local church is being the hospital that it needs to be. Because, man, the world doesn't need a bunch of country club Christians today, Jonathan. There's nothing I want less in my life. As a follower of Jesus, I don't even want to be associated with that. It makes me feel sick to think, I have to be this really polished, perfect person and be so buttoned up and be so laced up, and I just can't have any sense of anything being wrong in me, otherwise people won't think well of me. That's just so opposite of what Jesus has come to free us from. And dude, there is life in Jesus, and there's hardship in the life of those who love Jesus, but you know what? The power we have to get through it is different than the power we had before Christ. And the way that you are today and the way that I am today is a direct reflection of God's mercy, tenderness, and love. Dude, that's a good life. It doesn't make it an easy life.
Amen.
But we got to share that with the world.
Real quick, before we close out here, I know we're running short on time. This series was fantastic. I know we're getting ready to start a new series. You want to give us a little bit of a blurb on what's in store for us at Calvary?
Yeah, so the next series we're going to do, Jonathan, is called Testify. And it's a series where we're going to be able to just focus in on the fact that God has given us a story that He wants to share for His glory. That God has given the world His story called the gospel in Jesus, and how He is going to impart within each one of us an ability to bring our story out to the world. We're going to be capturing a ton of testimonies, sharing them on Sunday and throughout the week. It's going to be, I think, a series that God's going to deeply use. And it's an opportunity for you through Facebook or wherever you're interacting with us on YouTube or off the website, to even write us, email us, message us through social media, and let us know some things that you would love to see in Coffee and Cuts in the season to come. We think the greatest idea we haven't had yet is still inside your chest. So let it out, let us know. We would love to put it into practice.